I am convinced that the majority of people in this country have had enough of all this lockdown stuff. They've had enough of the ongoing coronavirus crisis. They realise that this is not a coronavirus crisis. This is a crisis caused by the government's overreaction to it. So people want to move on. They want to get back to normal. They want to try and rescue our shattered economy and get back to what used to be free life in Britain.
That's exactly right. I get the exact same feeling. I think people are just exhausted by the lockdown now. They recognize, as you say, that it isn't the virus that has destroyed their lives and their livelihoods. It's the overreaction by the government. It's the way in which Labour is pushing the government to go even harder and harder, the role played by sections of the media class as well, which really whipped up fear of COVID in the early days and pushed the government into a corner on lockdown. I think people now recognise that the lockdown is having a devastating impact on their futures, on the economy, and on freedom. We've lost all our civil liberties, all our political rights. Democracy was suspended for a few months, and the economy is heading into freefall. I think a lot of people now want us to go back to normal, shield the vulnerable, and carry on as we were before.
Yeah, I mean, take a leaf out of Sweden's book. Whatever they say about Sweden, not many people are dying there now, and our death rate is going up. And you have here, right before our very eyes, living proof of the fact that our 3-4 month lockdown over the spring and the summer did not work. Otherwise, why would we be in this situation now? And yet, what is the government's response to it? The fact that lockdown didn't work? Oh, more lockdowns. What is Wales' response to it? More lockdowns. Wales, Brendan, is already planning its next lockdown. I mean, it's bizarre. What is wrong with these people?
It's crazy. It's like they've lost all control over their brains. I mean, it is completely deranged what's going on. And the question a lot of people are asking is, if the 3 or 4 month lockdown we had initially didn't work, why would these shorter lockdowns work? Why would it work to have a lockdown every other month? The thing is, it seems to many people that officialdom are just, they don't know what they're doing. They're out of control. And the people who will suffer are ordinary people who will lose their jobs, might lose their homes, might not be able to plan their futures in the way that they wanted to, and, as I say, don't have their freedoms anymore. So I think we really need an anti-lockdown movement. We need people to stand up and say, listen, we know it's a serious virus. We know that it impacts on elderly people in particular. So let's take some specific measures to protect those people. But let's rescue the economy before it turns into a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah, as I was implying just now, the thing that this government does is it likes to convince itself that it has the support of the majority, if not the vast majority of the people, in its frantic efforts to beat this not particularly lethal virus. They commission polls to convince themselves of these facts. I suspect that the poll question is something like this: in order to prevent the death of millions of people, would you support further lockdowns? And so people say yes. The government now says we have the support. Now I'm sensing they do not have the support of the majority of the people. The people, as you say, the novelty is really worn off. They want to get back to normal. They fear terrible things about to happen due to the economy crashing. What I'm getting at is, Brendan, is I suspect that the next thing this government's going to have to deal with is widespread disobedience. People will not obey their decrees and diktats for much longer, and certainly will not obey the diktat that they will not be able to mix with their friends and families at Christmas.
Absolutely right. And we already know that only around 10% of people are adhering to quarantine when they've had a test and trace response. People aren't adhering to the rules, and they're not adhering to the rules because they know that they are stupid in many cases. They know that many people just can't afford to stay at home for 2 weeks. They have to go to work. They have no choice. But the thing is, one important point is that the lockdown is having a massive, there's a class differential going on here. It's impacting much harder on working class people and poorer people, whereas lots of middle class people, and particularly people in the elites, they can work from home. They live in nice houses. They probably got a garden. They can still get their meals delivered by, badly paid motorcyclists. And so for them, it's quite novel. It's quite nice. It's quite interesting. But for millions of other people, it has meant job losses. It's meant being stuck in a small flat with no garden. So the lockdown has had a terrible impact on the less well-off sections of society, which is why to hear the left in particular and the Labour Party clamouring for another lockdown, they've completely lost touch with what working people need and want. And I think what they want is a healthier economy, a restoration of normality, and just going forward in the way that we had been prior to the virus.
If you put together the fact that most people can see that lockdowns don't work because our 4-month lockdown didn't work, and the fact that so many of the diktats and decrees from Matt Hancock and indeed the Welsh people are patently absurd, like you can't buy socks. If you add to the fact, so they know that these measures are ineffective, they also spot that lots of them are absurd. That's the perfect storm. As Lord Sumption said last week in a newspaper article, people will not obey the rules for these reasons, and his payoff in his article was, and who can blame them? So Lord Sumption is basically saying, and this is the premier legal mind in this country, saying that he completely supports people who have no intention of obeying the government. As they say in the words of the song, there may be trouble ahead.
Absolutely. And I think the reason people are breaking these rules, and people are doing it every single day, is because the rules make no sense to them. They know that they're ineffective. We know that from the first lockdown, which, by the way, we were told would only last 3 weeks and was only designed to protect the NHS. And it ended up going on for months on end, and it became about preventing anyone from ever catching the virus. So there was mission creep right at the very start. But I think people also recognise that these rules are illegitimate. They're passed by government diktat. There's very little discussion in Parliament, no discussion at all with the public. People don't want to live under laws that they feel are illegitimate and ineffective. So people are cracking on with their lives. And you mentioned Christmas. That's going to be the real test, because if the government thinks it can stop people from mixing in households on Christmas Day, then it must be even more crazy than I thought, because that is the time of year when people are going to rip up every single rule, do what they want. And the truth of the matter is, there's nothing the government can do about it. And that's going to be a real test of just how exhausted people feel with the current situation.
I'm going to ask you one more question, running out of time, I'm afraid. But as I always say to you, I think with monotonous regularity, I feel like we are plummeting into a vortex of madness. And I think the question I want to ask you is, can you begin to work out what on earth is going on in Boris Johnson's mind as he continues down this insane path, the road to nowhere or the road to destruction? I mean, what is going on?
It's a mystery, and I think there's an element of cowardice or over cautiousness in Boris Johnson's government. What they have to realise is that they were enthusiastically voted in December last year with a huge democratic mandate, much of which came from former Labour voters. They've got to be more confident. A government with such a huge democratic mandate should not be bowing and scraping to all the experts, so-called experts, should not be feeling the pressure of the media, which is a very tiny section of society, and should not roll over and do what lefty Labour activists tell it to do. It should be more confident. It should know that it will have the trust of the people if it starts doing the right thing. At the moment, it's doing the wrong thing, and that means that public trust is going to corrode in this government very fast.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Boris Johnson now looks like the man who won't give gruel to poor little Oliver Twist. It's so bad. Brendan, always a pleasure. Very wise words. Thank you so much, mate.